Hi, everyone. I'm Nathan Harvey. I lead up DORA here with Google Cloud, and I just want to kick us off with a few things that are new with DORA. So let's take a look at a few of those things that are new. One thing that's new, hopefully you've downloaded this by now, but in case you haven't, it's possible that you've missed it. We recently released a new report, The Impact of Generative AI in Software Development. This report is chock full of not only our findings, but also some advice, some practical advice that you can put into practice to help your team not only adopt Gen AI, which is important, but also hopefully get more value out of the generative AI that you're putting into your organization and into some of your workflows. So download that report, give it a read. We, of course, always want to hear your feedback on that. Your feedback is really important to all of the research that we do moving forward. Best place to share that feedback on this report is probably right on the DORA Community Discussion board. So hopefully you're all members of that. If not, head over to DORA.community so that you can join. Speaking of research that we do, one of the things that we do with our research each year is we open up opportunities for organizations to sponsor our research. So if you work at a company that might be interested in having some branding associated with DORA and want to be part of helping drive this research forward, you can find information about how to sponsor right there on dora.dev/sponsors. Speaking of your organization, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I bet you're doing some really great stuff, taking DORA's ideas and putting them into practice. If that's the case, you should totally get into the nomination pool for the 2025 DORA Awards. Now, I should say these are the Google Cloud DORA Awards, which means that there are some requirements in order to be nominated or to win a Google Cloud DORA Award. You have to be, well, a Google Cloud user. So if you're doing some things on Google Cloud and you're finding that these things are helping you and taking DORA's ideas and findings and putting them into practice within your organization, we definitely encourage you to nominate yourself or your organization for a Google Cloud DORA Award. Doing so allows us to help celebrate what you're doing and accomplishing. It also includes some press releases that we'll put out, blog posts and so forth, and opportunities to do webinars with us, all of that stuff. So you can also read about previous winners if you want to get some inspiration or take some proof points to your leadership team at that same URL, cloud.google.com/awards/DevOps. So hopefully we'll see lots of you from the DORA community nominating yourselves. Give us, the judges, a really hard time selecting who the winners should be this year. Okay, so those are some of the new things, but without much further ado, I'm really excited today to welcome Kevin Borders, who is the co-founder, or maybe the founder, sorry, and the CEO at a company called minware. Kevin has a background in engineering and obviously now as a startup founder. So we're really happy to have Kevin here. Kevin and one of his coworkers, Dan, is also with us today. They've both been pretty active members within the DORA community, showing up for meetings, contributing ideas and thoughts. And I'm really interested to see this talk from Kevin before we move over into our lean coffee. Now, I should warn you, I've seen these slides, and yes, there are math in these slides and some equations. So break out your number 2 pencils and maybe a notebook and get ready to jot down some notes as we hand things over to Kevin, who's going to introduce us to some cool new ideas before we head over to a lean coffee. So Kevin, over to you.
Thanks, Nathan. All right, let me share my screen here. So yeah, DORA's been through quite a journey with all the surveys over the past several years, and it's become pretty well known amongst people, and it's become popular, which is great. It's great that there's more awareness of what it means to do engineering well. And DORA's proven to be really effective for gauging the health of the organization. And the metrics in particular are good at this. And the reason why the metrics are effective at gauging org health is because they're really broad and they include a lot of different things. And so if you're deploying every day, then you must be doing like 10 different things well. And so from a survey perspective, where people have limited time and attention, and their ability to recall things is going to be potentially unreliable, this type of metric is really good for that. And it's good that people have awareness that they should be deploying more frequently and having shorter lead times. But the problem, of course, is, now it's, well, my boss wants to see DORA metrics, and like, we need to see the DORA metrics so we can see if we're an elite team. And if we're not, we need to improve the DORA metrics. But the metrics weren't designed for identifying specific root causes of things that are going to help you be better. They're designed to broadly measure things. And because the metrics are sort of A plus B plus C plus D plus E, if you try to optimize them directly, you're going to run up against a wall, because if you change one little thing, and you can only really change one thing at once, the random variation from all the other factors is going to drown out the signal, and it's going to be difficult to figure out whether you've gotten better or not. And so we've experienced this talking to a lot of people who are really excited. They want DORA metrics, they want to improve, and they adopt these DORA metrics, and then a year later they turn out from a tool that offers them because they didn't really know what to do to actually make them better. So we're going to talk about how to get specific actionable insights that will ultimately drive improvements to your organization and to metrics. And the key idea that I encourage everyone to think about here is rewriting the equation. A metric is a composition of a lot of individual things, and you can always drill down into, what did this person do today, or what about this step of the process? Software development is complicated. Software development lifecycle involves a very large number of steps and stakeholders and activities, and metrics that we look at to measure org health, like deployment frequency, are really just a roll up of all of these things, and addition, multiplication is just one big equation. I think is a helpful way to think about it. So for example, for deployment frequency, you can approximately rewrite deployment frequency as the inverse of the time between deployments. Okay, well, what drives the time between deployments? Well, you're going to have, each deployment is going to have a certain number of distinct changes, let's say pull requests, or however you want to unitize a change, multiplied by the number of changes. And this is a rough approximation, of course, because maybe some changes can be worked on in parallel, maybe some can't, or whatever. Maybe the deployment can happen, maybe the next change can start while the deployment's going on. But what we're trying to do is identify things that, it doesn't have, we're not getting a math PhD here. We're just trying to find things that roughly corresponds to the higher level metric. So you can think of it as changes per deployment times the lead time for each change plus the time to do the deployment itself. And this helps you decompose and start to isolate the different components. So changes per deployment. For example, for this, it could be one if you're successfully doing trunk-based development. If you're not, then why is that? If you release to an app store, maybe you're constrained. Maybe you want to rewrite your or redo your deployment frequency metrics to measure how frequently you deploy to your realistic preview environment that people are using regularly, and beta customers or internal users. Or on the other hand, if it's because deployment is painful and you just avoid it, then you can drive down the time to deployment. Now, I'm just going to go back to this slide. Why is this important? Because one of the classic problems with deployment frequency and people saying, oh, well, it depends on your context. Let's say you do deploy to an app store and your deployment frequency is just once per week because that's all the app store lets you do. Well, then if you break down deployment frequency in this way, you can identify other things that could be helpful to optimize because your deployment frequency is kind of stuck at a floor due to these constraints. And then if your deployment itself is slow, you can drill down further. You got some automated time, you got some manual time potentially, and you've got a failure rate where you have to redo part or all of the deployment, and then the time to actually push it out. So if your time to get software out the door is really slow, then you can start to figure out, further, like what is actually driving that, and come up with an equation that more or less adds up to the higher level metric. Lead time for changes. So it's interesting that lead time for changes is going to affect your deployment frequency a lot of the time, and is another one of the classic DORA metrics. So this one, the first way I like to break this down is to split it into the size of changes multiplied by the efficiency of making a change of a certain size. And this is important. This is helpful because there's different root causes of large change sizes and workflow and efficiency problems. So it helps to sort of separate them. And you can further separate change size into the average change size for a certain type multiplied by changes of that type over the total changes. If you ship more bugs, you can actually drive down your lead times. So you should really be looking at how long or how big things are of a certain change type and what your mixture is, because there are definitely perverse ways to game metrics or to push people to optimize things in a way that produces results that you don't want. And then the actual size of an individual change is really a factor of many different choices and aspects of software development. You could really kind of break this down ad nauseum, but there's a difficulty, there's the skill, there's a lot of factors in the difficulty, including your architecture, tech debts, skill, training, team composition, morale. So there's a lot going on here that you can drill into further. And the other side of the equation, the workflow efficiency, is a really interesting one too. There's a lot of reasons why you might not be able to complete a task efficiently. And the way I like to think about this is 1 divided by work in progress. And then you can start to think about what are the tasks that are in progress, not just what has a JIRA ticket, but meetings, spending time chatting on Slack, emails, other sorts of interruptions. And then you can sort of put that in 2 buckets. One bucket is I'm blocked. And another bucket is somebody is interrupting me. And these tend to have different causes as well. You can further break down I'm blocked into, am I waiting for another person to do something for me or a system? Is this something that can be optimized, or do we need to figure out how our work is structured so that people aren't blocking each other? And then there's, of course, the different types of interruptions, which I'm sure y'all can think of even more examples. So I didn't want to talk for too long here. I just wanted to set the stage for a useful approach for breaking down metrics. And there's tons of ways you can break these things down. Might seem a little overwhelming, but one of the things that's helpful to keep in mind is that you don't need to drill down into exactly how much time did each stage in the CI/CD pipeline take if your build is 5 minutes and it's not an issue. Where you need to drill down is into the big numbers. And you want to break down the big numbers until they're small enough that you feel like you understand what's going on. So how much effort you invest in trying to identify root causes of inefficiencies in your process will depend on where the bottlenecks are. And of course, part of the reason we have the popular DORA metrics we have is because they are things that are measurable. But once you start trying to break things down, they may not be so measurable. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't think about them or try to isolate them in something like developer skill. There's not really one definition for that, and it might be task dependent. But it's still important to think about so that you can make sure you're not drawing false conclusions when really the causation is coming from a different factor than the most obvious one. So wanted to open things up for discussion. I'm curious to hear how people think about this and do this, as well as the areas where it's still really hard, and what are the gaps, what are the things that still just feel like, hear this from a lot of people, things aren't as fast as I have experienced them on other teams or as I think they should be, and I just am not sure why. So I'm curious to hear from people about that too, in those types of scenarios where there's still a gap in the ability to measure and understand what's going on. So that will go to the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin, so much. I love how, I guess, throughout your discussion now, I've got, like, I'm seeing things in smaller pieces, especially when it comes to like the capabilities that DORA has identified. So thank you for kicking us off with this context.